I once heard an ancient parable that apparently originates in China called The Farmer and His Son. And it goes like this. There was this man who lived on a farm with his son, and he owned a horse which he needed for help around the farm. However, one day the paddock gate blew open and this horse that he owned ran away over the horizon. Now, the neighbours from the village saw all of this happening. They saw the horse bolting over the horizon. So they came over to commiserate with the farmer. They said, "Bad luck, isn't it? Your horse is now gone, and now your work is going to be so much harder without it." The farmer was surprisingly philosophical, however, about the whole incident. He merely shrugged and said, "Good luck or bad luck, what do I know about these things? We'll see." Now, the next day, the horse came back to the farm, and very surprisingly and very happily, it came back with 10 other horses alongside him. The horse had joined up with a wild herd who had followed him home back to the farm. The farmer rounded them all up and put them back into the paddock. The neighbours again saw what had happened here, and they came over to congratulate the farmer. "Amazing, isn't it? It turns out that your horse bolting yesterday wasn't bad luck after all, it was good luck. If that horse had never escaped, you wouldn't have acquired all these 10 extra horses today." The farmer again was still very philosophical about the whole thing. He simply said, "Good luck or bad luck? What do I know about these things? We'll see." Now, the following day, the farmer's son was out trying to tame one of these new wild horses when he fell off and he broke his leg. The nosy neighbours again saw what had happened, and they came over to commiserate once more with the farmer, saying, "Terrible, isn't it? Acquiring all of these wild horses wasn't good luck. After all, it was bad luck. If they never arrived, your son would never have broken his leg, and now he won't be able to help you around the farm, and your workload is going to increase." The farmer was still very philosophical about the whole thing. He simply said, "Good luck or bad luck? What do I know about these things? We'll see." Now, the following day, a press gang arrived in the area. A war had broken out, and they were on the prowl for able-bodied young men to forcibly conscript into the army. The gang came to the farm looking to take the farmer's son away. However, when they discovered he had a broken leg, they decided he was unable to fight, they left him alone, and they simply moved on to the next place. After they'd gone, the neighbours came over and said, "Wow, it wasn't bad luck that the horse broke your son's leg after all. It was good luck. If that wild horse hadn't broken his leg, the press gang would have dragged him off to war, where he would have surely died." The farmer remained as philosophical as ever. He merely shrugged and said, "Good luck or bad luck? What do I know about these things? We'll see." The moral of the story, of course, is that the unfolding of time is a process of such immense complexity, with so many variables in play, that with our limited human knowledge and understanding, it's really impossible for us to say whether something is a good thing or a bad thing in the long run. We never know what lies around the next corner. Therefore, what seems like bad luck today can often be to our advantage in the long run. And the opposite is true. What seems to be positive in the immediate sense can often be seen as a negative thing when viewed with the benefit of hindsight. We just don't know what the consequences of events are going to be with the passing of time. I'm reminded of some real-life examples of this concept that came out of the 9/11 terrorist attacks in New York City. On September the 10th, 2001, the day before the attacks, a man called George Keith was driving his brand new BMW through Central Park when the vehicle unexpectedly developed a gearbox problem. He made an appointment at the dealership for the following morning, September the 11th, at 7 a.m. to get it fixed, and it was imperative that the work was done quickly because he had a very important meeting in the Twin Towers at 8 a.m. that day. George Keith explained, however, "I got to the BMW dealership at 7, but the mechanics refused to work before 8, so I waited an hour for a 3-minute repair. Hugely annoyed by this inconvenience, he left the repair shop well after 8 a.m. He was frustrated that he was now going to be very late for this very important meeting in the Twin Towers. But as he made his way to work that morning, he says, "I was sitting on the expressway in traffic when I saw smoke coming out of the top of the first tower that was hit, and turned on the radio to hear that a small plane had crashed into it. At that point, I glanced behind me at the Hudson River and saw a jet flying lower than I've ever seen. I couldn't take my eyes off it, and then it smashed into the second tower. I'm fortunate my car broke down. Many people I know didn't make it." The first plane struck at 8:46 a.m. and the second at 9:03 a.m., which means that if George Keith had not been so inconvenienced by the breakdown of his car and the mechanics refusing to work early that morning, he would have been in the building and he would have died on September the 11th. There are many other stories as well, like George Keith's. Crystal Brown Tatum, for example, would have been in Tower Block 2 at the time of impact, starting a brand new job, if it wasn't for recently discovering that her fiancé had been cheating on her, and therefore she decided not to join him in New York City. Another man, James DeFurek, had been frustratingly held up that morning with lots of problems and couldn't get to work on time. Another woman, Holly Winter, was so annoyed when her mum decided upon an inconvenient visit that kept her from the office that day. All of these people felt annoyed, frustrated, or even heartbroken at their supposed bad luck on the morning of September the 11th. However, they didn't know that their bad luck was actually good luck. Their lives were ultimately being saved as a result of these momentary pains. Since God is omniscient, clearly it's not beyond the realm of possibility that over the course of our lives, He may allow pains and inconveniences to divert the course of our life and perhaps even save us from things without us even being aware. Maybe there's a time that you tripped and you injured yourself while walking down the street, and while feeling sore and embarrassed and cursing your luck because you've just ripped holes in the knees of these brand new expensive trousers, what if that incident saved you from crossing the road and being mown down by a drunk driver 30 seconds later? The truth is, we would never know. All we would know is we felt pain and embarrassment that day, and it was just a complete day to forget. We would never know that God had actually saved our life that day by allowing that painful and uncomfortable situation. Maybe there's a time we were en route to somewhere important, maybe an important meeting, but then you get a call from a family member and it's something urgent, something potentially bad has happened. So you've got to go check it out. And while muttering under your breath that this is just a terrible day, what if that diversion caused you to avoid a mugger waiting in an alleyway further down the street? From your vantage point, all you would ever know is this was just a terrible day, a day to forget. You wouldn't know that God had allowed that bad thing to happen in your family to save you from something much, much worse. The story of the farmer and his son invites us to not be like the villagers who react with volatility to every immediate circumstance we find ourselves in. Oh, that's a bad situation. Oh no, it's a good thing. Oh no, it's a bad thing. Rather, we're invited to live like the wise philosophical farmer who understands there are ups and downs over the course of life. Things happen, and from our lower perspective, we just don't know. We don't have the omniscience to understand whether those events are ultimately good or ultimately bad. We just don't know. How many times may God, completely unbeknownst to us, have saved our life or spared us some harrowing event by allowing problems to come across our path? How many times have struggles actually been blessings in disguise? How many times has bad luck actually been good luck? Actually, we don't believe in luck, but you know what I mean. We'll never know this stuff. At least we won't know until we get to heaven. And only then might God sit us down and replay all of these moments in our life when He was intervening for our good. And He might say, remember that failure that happened, that heartbreak, that problem, that disaster, that inconvenience that you absolutely hated at the time. Well, let me show you what would have happened if I hadn't allowed it. Let me show you how it would have ultimately led to X and then Y and then Z. And in that moment of realization, it's very possible that we'll see our pains in this life in an entirely different way. Rather than being angry with God for them, we might even be thankful. A bit like those who were spared in 9/11. Have you ever seen injured or endangered wild animals being shot with an anaesthetic dart by conservationists? They're put to sleep so that medical teams can tend to a wound or try to protect them from some danger. From the animal's lower perspective, they tend to panic and they try to escape in these situations. They think the human beings are a threat that mean to harm them, and all they know is this dart hitting their hide is a painful and distressing experience. They don't know that these humans, through this minor pain, are actually trying to save their life. Or have you ever taken a dog to the vet and they don't really like it, they try to struggle against it or escape, or they just get sad about the situation? From their lower perspective, the dog only knows that painful things happen at the vet. They don't really understand why we would let them go through all of this pain, and they don't like it one bit, even though it's only because we want them to be healthy or we're trying to save their life. Well then, if we accept that our understanding is below God's to at least the same degree as an animal's is below ours, and is actually much lower, in fact, then we have to accept this possibility that God is letting us experience pains for reasons we don't really understand, but which nevertheless are ultimately for our good. Timothy Keller wrote this very eloquently. He said, "If you have a God great and transcendent enough to be mad at because He hasn't stopped the evil and suffering in the world, then you have at that same moment a God great and transcendent enough to have good reasons for allowing it to continue that you can't know Indeed, you can't have it both ways. We have to accept that God knows things that we don't know, He has understanding we don't have, and therefore He may be allowing things to happen with very good reasons that we can't know about. Indeed, just because we don't always understand the reasons, it doesn't mean that there aren't any or that there can't be any. The question we have to ask ourselves here is, will you trust Him? Will you trust God in these situations? The sooner an animal trusts their human or their vet that there's a point to their pain, then obviously the better it is for them because they're made whole and healthy more quickly. And likewise, the sooner that we as humans trust God that there's a point to our pain, the better it is for us too. So yes, God may allow painful things to happen, but who's to say that those things aren't ultimately to our advantage in the long run? We don't know the future. We don't know what's coming around the next corner, so we can't really say from our vantage point whether that event is ultimately a good thing or ultimately a bad thing. God can though, because God is omniscient. So why don't we just trust Him on this issue? Actually, on that point, I'd also like to say this, that to judge God for allowing pain today and saying, I will turn my back on Him because He's allowed pain and suffering in the world, it's a bit like judging a novelist for not resolving a story when you're only halfway through the book. The story that God's telling through world history isn't finished yet. We're only part of the way through this story. Our lives aren't even finished yet. Surely we must wait until the end of the story before we're able to look back and see the big picture and how it all came together. It's like the story of the farmer and his son. He could never have predicted how all of those events would have unfolded, that the horse bolting would lead to more wild horses coming, which would lead to his son breaking his leg, which would lead to him escaping an army press gang. He could only see all of that in reverse after the fact. And it's the same for us too. Only at the end will we be able to look back and see how that event caused that event, or because that event, oh, because that event, or because that event, and so on. And we'll see that that thing that seemed to be like a bad thing at the time actually turned out to be a good thing through this kind of domino effect. Again, some of our struggles might not make sense to us right now, but that doesn't mean that they have no sense, and it doesn't mean that they won't make sense at some point in the future. And I think even within our own lifetimes, we can already see this truth coming to pass, that there were pains and struggles that didn't really seem to make much sense at the time and we didn't like it, but we can already see that that thing actually turned out to be for our best in the long run. If so, then let's approach all of life with a humility that says that God is greater than us, He knows more than us, He knows the future, and therefore He may ask us to endure things for reasons we don't really understand, but which are ultimately for our own good. That's part of what it means to have faith. And always remember that one day God promises we will understand all of this. It's just about having faith between this point and that point still to come. I've actually been doing some family tree research recently, and as part of the investigations I visited the graves of my grandparents, and as I was leaving one of these graveyards I was just browsing some of the quotes on the headstones, and near the gate I saw this one phrase that has really stuck in my mind. I just find this so poignant. It was a very simple phrase, but it communicated so much to me. It just said, "One day we'll understand." And that's all it said. And to me, it spoke of people who had clearly endured pain, who didn't really know why, who didn't really understand, but who had taken Jesus at His word when He said, "You don't understand now what I am doing, but someday you will." They had the humility to say, now we see things imperfectly, like puzzling reflections in a mirror, but then we will see everything with perfect clarity. All that I know now is partial and incomplete, but then I will know everything completely, just as God now knows me completely. Or, as the farmer said, one day we'll see.